And our Old Testament reading this morning comes from Nehemiah 12, verses 27 through 30. Now at the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, they sought out the Levites in all their places to bring them to Jerusalem to celebrate the dedication with rejoicing, with thanksgivings, and with singing, with cymbals, harps, and lyres. The company of the singers gathered together from the circuit around Jerusalem and from the villages of Netophathites, also from Beth Gilgal, and from the region of Geba and Asmatheth. For singers had built for themselves villages around Jerusalem. And the priests and the Levites purified themselves, and they purified the people and the gates and the wall. And our New Testament reading this morning comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 1 through 17. And so, brothers and sisters, I could not speak to you as spiritual people, but rather as people of the flesh, as infants in Christ. I fed you with milk, not solid food, for you were not ready for solid food. Even now, you are still not ready. For you are still of the flesh. For as long as there is jealousy and quarreling among you, are you not of the flesh and behaving according to human inclinations? For when one says, I belong to Paul, and another, I belong to Apollos, are you not merely human? What then is Apollos? What is Paul? Servants through whom you came to believe as the Lord assigned to each? I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. According to the grace of God given to me, like a skilled master builder, I laid a foundation, and someone else is building on it. Each builder must choose with care how to build on it. For no one can lay any foundation other than the one that has been laid. That foundation is Jesus Christ. Now, if anyone builds on the foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, the work of each builder will become visible, for the day will disclose it, because it will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test what sort of work each has done. If what has been built on the foundation survives, the builder will receive a reward. If the work is burned up, the builder will suffer loss. The builder will be saved, but only as through fire. Do you not know that you are God's temple, and that God's Spirit dwells in you? If anyone destroys God's temple, God will destroy that person. For God's temple is holy, and you are that temple.
Our reading from the Gospel today is from the Gospel according to Matthew 16, 13 to 20. Now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, but others Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Then he sternly ordered the disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. Every church has someone or something that is its rock. It could be a founding family, a building, or a connection to the land and the people. It's the bedrock of the community. Now, like most people, I don't think much about rocks unless they're in the way. There are places in some of the highways up north where I lived for a time, and the way through has been blasted through the rock. And sometimes they go through these rock cuts, as they're called, and they seem quite beautiful. You see all the layers of all the centuries of rock that have formed. And yet at the same time, it's a sign that as human beings, we can't keep anything natural and leave it alone. We have clear-cut some forests, we have dammed some rivers in the name of progress. And we need to find a way to coexist with nature again and to get back to the bedrock on which we live. Now, the bedrock of a church moves continually as well. How we worship, when we worship, who we worship with, are the forces on which the ground moves that we stand. The church never stands still. It is organic, and it lives through many cycles. The Apostle Paul understood this when he wrote his first letter to the church in Corinth. He wrote, "I planted, Apollos watered, but God was causing the growth." Unless the church is founded on God, it will not grow and flourish. And Paul continues by describing his early work with the Corinthian church as laying a foundation. And the foundation is not made with bricks and stones, but with the faith of people in Jesus Christ. There is no other foundation. I remember a hymn, "On Christ the solid rock I stand." Does anybody here remember that one? Oh, come on, you must know that one. I'm looking at Catherine, our music director. Well, what did Jesus mean by the word church? Now, the Greek word is ecclesia, which means those who are called out as if for an assembly. But today we use the word ecclesiastical to refer to churches and to the work of the church. Christians are those who have been called out of this world while still living in the world. We are called out of living by the standards and values of the material world, which Paul calls the flesh. To a higher life we are called in the spiritual world. We are citizens of the kingdom of heaven, and how we live matters because it shows others what that kingdom looks like. And if it is a place of jealousy and quarreling, as it was in Corinth, that church will not survive. But the church survives because it is built upon layers and layers of faith, left behind by its forebears. And there's often visual evidence in plaques, in cornerstones, in engraved communion ware, and stained glass windows. And I hope you'll take some time to look at those and think about those people who came before us. Without the faith of those givers, these would merely be artifacts of a different age. Now, places are important to people. For the generation of Israelites who had lived as slaves in Babylon, the city and the temple in Jerusalem were symbols of who and whose they are. And some of them had returned and rebuilt the temple. But Nehemiah heard that the walls of the city had not been rebuilt, but lay in ruins. And so he appealed to the Persian king, Artaxerxes, for permission to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the wall. And even though this king was a pagan, he supplied the means for Nehemiah to return. He gave him cavalry and officers and letters of safe passage for travel. Now, once Nehemiah arrived, he found that there was apathy, opposition, and outright hostility to his plan. But he persisted, and the wall was finally built. And when the wall was finished, it was the people who searched for the Levites, who had been the historical priests of the temple, in order to consecrate it. And musicians and singers came from all over. And then the priests purified the gates, the walls, and then they purified the people. So the project began with the people and it ended with the people. But establishing a worshiping community needs more than walls and foundations. It needs the people as well, or it is meaningless. We are assembled here today as people commemorating the anniversary of this church. We celebrate the people who have gone before us. We remember their stories and contributions that made this church possible. And we also remember the history of this building and the stages in which it was built. And like the ancient Israelites, we celebrate that worship has been celebrated here for over 100 years. Now, the Apostle Peter is usually credited with establishing the church. And when the disciples were asked by Jesus, "Who do you say that I am?" Peter was the only one who was able to say, "You are the Messiah. You are the Son of the living God." And for this, Jesus declares, "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." Now, throughout much of church history, it's been assumed that Jesus meant that he would build his his church upon Peter. But Jesus didn't say that. He said to Peter, "On this rock." He didn't say, "On you." Because the rock is the confession of faith that Peter made. This is the rock upon which the church is built, that you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Now, Peter didn't come to this conclusion by himself. It wasn't based even on anything that Jesus had said or done. It was a gift of grace from heaven. And our faith as well is not based on anything that we can say or do. It is a freely given gift from God. And what we do with that is our gift back to God. Now, the setting for this discussion between Jesus and his disciples is in Caesarea Philippi, which was the Roman playground for the rich in that time. It was kind of the Las Vegas of its day. And all around were emblems of power and privilege. And so for Jesus to ask this question in this place was actually a very dangerous thing, with all kinds of things around saying that the emperor was God. To ask, "Who do you say that I am?" was actually a revolutionary act. We still find it hard to speak of our faith, especially when we feel that we might be ridiculed, made fun of for saying that. And yet, the good news is that we don't have to say anything at all. It's our actions that testify to who we are and whose we are. Our lived faith is enough to testify to what we believe. We call our churches now communities of faith. It's a place of mutual discernment, of planning our lives forward together, because we need each other's strength and faith. Now, this is a time in the life of the church when it can be hard to see what lies ahead. More churches are closing every week, and we sometimes wonder, will this one be next? Well, God does not grant us the ability to see the future, and for that I am very glad. We can't know the future of Zion United any more than we can know the future of our own lives. But we can be sure of this, that the generations of the faithful who worshipped here did not do so in vain. Faith is like the bedrock of the community. It is the bedrock of the world. Now, sometimes that bedrock is deep underground and unseen. It's formed when layers of organic and inorganic matter are formed under great pressure. Perhaps our churches, when there is enough pressure, will also form that bedrock again. Our world today is under many pressures: political, economic, social. And yet we know that bedrock does not always stay in place. It moves. The tectonic plates underneath it are what move and cause the earthquakes because the earth is still alive. The rock on which we stand is alive. And so our faith constantly is in motion with that. We will continue to celebrate those moments along the way when we know that we are not alone. In this great enterprise called life, God is the architect and God is the builder. We are co-workers with God, and we build ourselves into holy temples for God, in which the Spirit resides. We are temples that have been built upon a bedrock of faith. So we give thanks to the God who created us, to Jesus who goes before us, and for the Spirit that dwells within us. Amen. Our next hymn is For All the Saints.